Back in 1911, a standard train was scheduled to depart from a railway station in Rome, hoping to reach the city of Milan. Needless to say, none of the 106 passengers ever made it to the destination, and no one has ever seen them again. What happened to these people and to their train? Were they really lost forever? Some people seem to believe this isn't the case. As it was completing its journey, the train was supposed to pass through a long tunnel. It did enter it, but never came out the other end of the tunnel. Nothing was left of the train, and it seemed like it literally just vanished into thin air. Only 2 of the passengers were found, but they were quite unwell at the time, and their stories did not seem to make much sense. They spoke of a dense fog that they simply jumped out of because they got so scared. 15 years later, a story spread about a group of 104 Italian people that popped up in Mexico City, claiming they had arrived by train from Rome. If that's not weird enough, the story appears to have been reported back in 1845, 66 years before the train even departed in the first place. Of course, nobody at the time actually took these people seriously, but you can't help but wonder, did they actually time travel via the Roman tunnel, or is it just another urban myth? What do you think? The Lost Colony is the story of a strange phenomenon that happened back in the late 1500s. A group of people from England had moved into a colony on Roanoke Island off the coast of present-day North Carolina, but they soon realized they didn't have enough supplies. To fix this, the colony's governor decided to head back to England to get some. He didn't manage to come back for another 3 years. When he finally did, he was astonished at what was left behind. Nothing. The entire population of the colony was gone. The only reminder of what had been there was a single word carved into a tree. To this day, nobody knows what might have happened to these people or what the carved word means. A lighthouse without an operator? You might think that can't possibly be true, but hear me out. Located in the northwestern part of Scotland are the Flannan Isles. There's nothing fancy about them since they're nothing more than a bunch of rocks and grass. But there is a famous lighthouse here hiding a dark secret. In 1900, all 3 of the lighthouse's keepers mysteriously disappeared, never to be seen again. Ever since, the islands have been completely abandoned. The lighthouse became one of those with an automated system in the 1970s. No list of places where things go missing could be complete without this mysterious forest located in Transylvania, a region in Romania. And no, it has nothing to do with the famous Count Dracula, if that's what you're thinking. It's called the Hoya Forest, and it's a place that has seen quite its share of unusual phenomena. Not only do people go missing here, but others have experienced all sorts of weird noises, from female voices to whispers. Some people claim to have time traveled between the spooky trees of the Hoya Forest. They say they had literally skipped a few hours before they went back. The Yellowhead Highway is a stretch of road located in British Columbia, Canada. One section of the road has received a lot of attention throughout the years, starting with the 1960s because of some mysterious disappearances. These events have earned it the nickname Highway of Tears. There is no reasonable explanation as to why people keep going missing here. What is more striking is that most of these people were young women. This triangular area that stretches above the desert and the Sierra Nevada mountains in the state of Nevada received quite a bit of attention because of a disappearance that happened back in 2007. A record-setting sailor, aviator, and adventurer named Steve Fawcett flew here in a small plane and then disappeared. They searched for Fawcett intensively for months, but didn't find any traces of him or the aircraft. 1 year later, the mystery of Fawcett's fate was finally solved when a hiker came across his ID cards, and later a search party found the plane's wreckage. It's one of the most visited natural resorts in the world, but Yosemite National Park carries some dark secrets of its own. Despite its beauty and abundance of wildlife, a total of 45 people went missing right here in this location. No one knows what happened to them. Hey, maybe we should ask the local bears. They might know something. There are even stories of people that disappeared from one region of the park only to pop up in a completely different location. This hasn't stopped over 3 million people that visit the park each year from wandering around this location, though. Whenever a ship happens to sink, you'd expect to at least find pieces of it on the bottom of the sea, right? Well, not if you're traveling through Lake Superior. It's located along the border of the United States and Canada, and became famous because of the great number of ships that went missing here. It may have something to do with the stormy winds, of course, but that doesn't explain why some ships simply vanish altogether, without a single piece of them ever to be found, not even at the bottom of the lake. It does gather a lot of tourists each year, though. They come here to scuba dive and see the remains of some of the ships that still lie here. The bottom of this lake even contains what's left of the notorious SS Edmund Fitzgerald. Back when it departed on June 7, 1958, it was the largest ship on North America's Great Lakes and, to this day, remains the largest ship ever to have sunk in the area. Similar to other events, the exact cause of the shipwreck remains a mystery.
How long does it normally take for a package to get to you? A day? A week? A month? How about over 3 years? Well, something like that happened in India not too long ago. At first glance, it doesn't seem all that surprising. Packages get delayed or even lost along the way all the time. That's just the nature of parcel delivery. This wasn't some standard package. It was an entire train carriage loaded with tons of compost. Something this massive couldn't have just disappeared and then come back. Or could it? Let's find out. And yes, along the way we're going to learn some cool things about trains. It all started in 2014 when an Indian company ordered dozens of tons of compost. All the goods were stored in 21 wagons. The train left the city of Visakhapatnam on November the 10th. Its destination was in Basti district, Uttar Pradesh, 870 miles away. So, the train left the station and the trip went smoothly. A few days later, the buyer accepted the goods. 20 wagons arrived in excellent condition, but one carriage, number 107462, was missing. Where could this wagon packed full of fertilizer have gone? Did someone steal the cargo? Did it get lost along the way? The buyer asked the company that sold them the compost to find the missing part of the shipment. The employees checked the documents and confirmed that the train of 21 carriages left the station on November the 10th. Several people from the rail station saw it. Then the train passed through some settlements and lost one carriage. But how? The buyer contacted the railway services but didn't receive any response. It seemed the train car had just disappeared. The documents indicated that all the paid goods went to the destination, which meant the buyer wouldn't get their money back. So they just lost more than $10,000. Months and years had passed, the incident eventually forgotten. But then, on July 25th, 2018, railway workers discovered an old carriage with the number 107462 on it at the station in Basti district, the original destination point. The company contacted the seller about their discovery, but they refused to accept the goods because the fertilizer had rotted long ago. They waited for the owner to come for it, but no one came, and no one reported it missing. So they towed the abandoned train car back to Basti district a few months later. By that time, the buyer had already reported the rail company about the lost compost, and they had already stopped searching for it, while the car was practically right under their noses. To this day, no one knows why the car was disconnected or where it's been all this time. You know where this would have never happened? Japan. There, you can ride the most punctual trains in the world. They arrive at all stations to the minute. All the locals know the trains are never late, so they can never use that excuse on their boss. But if something does happen to cause the train to arrive late, passengers receive a special ticket from the rail company that they can use as proof to protect them from their boss's accusations. Japan has not only the most punctual trains in the world, but also the fastest. I'm talking about Maglev trains that can reach speeds up to 374 miles per hour. To give you an idea of how fast that is, the fastest recorded speed set by a Formula One car is 231.4 miles per hour. Not even close to the Maglev train just traveling down its normal route. What's more, even if it travels at top speed, you can comfortably sit in your seat and drink tea on the train. You won't feel any vibrations or hear the sound of the wheels because it has no wheels at all. Maglev is short for magnetic levitation. Using the power of magnets, the train is basically suspended, floating just above the railway, meaning they don't actually touch, meaning there's next to no friction. This is what allows Maglev trains to reach and then maintain such incredible speeds. Wouldn't it be cool to have such trains in every city? I mean, forget about traffic jams, am I right? But unfortunately, they're not so popular around the world. Charging the train's magnets requires a lot of energy. They heat up to incredibly high temperatures during the trip, and then they need to cool down after. And this also requires a lot of incredibly expensive infrastructure. For many countries, such trains would be simply economically unviable. For now. That carriage in India would probably have been standing at the railway station forever if someone hadn't noticed it. But what if it was a whole train with, let's say, 100 cars? I mean, what do people do with old train cars? Usually they would put old trains in landfills, dismantle them for scrap, dispose of them with pressure compacting, or melt them down. But the most popular practice is to load the bare hulls of wagons onto a big ship and then throw them in the ocean. It's not as wasteful as you think. The trains actually provide a great frame for corals and plant life to grow on them. And soon these overgrown train carriages become homes for fish and other ocean inhabitants. This is how the people in New York decided to get rid of their old trains. From 2001 to 2010, they sank more than 2,000 cars this way. And soon, these trains became artificial reefs. They got completely covered by corals and algae, and shells, crabs, sea sponges, mackerels, perches, and sea turtles settled in each car. Underwater photographers and divers filmed those wagons and even saw dolphins swimming through them. It's like an underwater city where the trains are free real estate for the fish. So, people provided modern housing for the fish and saved about $30 million on recycling. I mean, I use the term modern very loosely. They look more like phantom trains. But you know what the coolest thing about phantom trains is? They actually exist. And you know what's even cooler? You can get in and ride one. You can find such trains in England, in small towns like Sneyd. Now, imagine you stepped onto the empty train station there. It looks decrepit and abandoned. There's no parking, no ticket machines, no shops. And now you hear the sounds of a train arriving at the station. It seems normal enough, but when you step inside, you'll probably feel some discomfort since you're the only passenger on this phantom train. You can walk from the first carriage to the last one if you like. No one will stop you. You can actually choose from several similar trains. Yeah, there's a lot of them moving all around England. They're left running through abandoned railways because it actually works out economically for the country. To cancel these phantom train routes, you'd need to go through many bureaucratic procedures and spend taxpayers' money. And there's no need to do all of that if the trains just go and don't bother anyone. Also, they attract many tourists and enthusiasts who love to visit abandoned stations. If you're interested, you should know that it's not so easy to find these routes. You need to carefully study train schedules on the internet, since not even all the railway workers know about them. In some remote places, the trains arrive only once every few days. But what about real phantom trains? There are many stories about trains that have mysteriously disappeared throughout the years. The most popular one is the legend of the Zanetti Train Company. Several wagons disappeared with dozens of passengers in a mountain tunnel in Italy in 1911, and then popped up out of the blue in 1845 in Mexico? But of course, there's no evidence for this story. Someone just wrote it in a newspaper and everyone believed it. The same thing happens with planes and ships that supposedly travel through time. Although it's much more common for sailing vessels to become abandoned and then left to sail aimlessly on the seas for decades. There's much more documented evidence of that. But if you really saw a mysterious train arriving at an old railway through the fog in the middle of the night, would you step inside?
It was a pitch-dark night, and we were out for a walk. Suddenly, a bright white light came from the train tracks. It was getting closer and closer before it reached the woods and suddenly faded away in the distance. This story, told by hundreds of witnesses, sounds quite normal until you find out those train tracks have long been abandoned and torn out. The last train that could have been the source of light had departed many years ago. The mysterious ghost train became the main site of St. Louis, a little village in the Canadian province of Saskatchewan. There are just around 400 people living there, and hundreds visit it to see the St. Louis light. It was featured in books and online, and was on TV shows like Unsolved Mysteries. For decades, no one could explain what it really was. Some people spotted a white light. Others said they'd seen a red one. An urban legend explained the red light was a lantern carried by a ghost of a train conductor who had lost his life one night examining the tracks. Scientists tried to debunk both ghost-involving theories, but failed. Then, 2 high school students from northern Saskatchewan decided to jump in. They first witnessed the ghost train on a road trip to St. Louis. One of the girls said it must have been car headlights, but she needed evidence to prove that. Together with her friend, she decided to find an answer and make it their science fair project. They made several field trips to St. Louis for research. The young Ghostbusters used a detailed map, a compass, and a GPS system, which was pretty rare back in 2001. The girls found the location from where the ghost light was seen best of all. Then, they drew a straight line on the map to where the light was coming from and marked all roads next to or on the line. One of the girls' father agreed to help them. He parked his car at various locations near the lines and flashed his headlights. The girls didn't see them, as all the places seemed to be too low. Finally, they found a short hilltop highway stretch. For 20 minutes, the dad was flashing his lights on and off, and every time the lights went on, the girls could spot the ghost train. When he turned the car around, they saw the mysterious red light as well. The spot was rather far away from the track, so it was possible to see it, thanks to diffraction. The light passed through a little opening, maybe the trees, and became larger. The smart girls received gold medals at the science fair for their project. 10 years later, a similar story happened in Anson, Texas. Each night, the locals noticed a mysterious light at one spot of the highway. They called it Anson Light and believed it was a mother with a lantern searching for her son. He'd disappeared in a snowstorm a long time ago. His mom went looking for him and never came back either. A group of students didn't believe in this beautiful story and decided to find the source of light with their iPhones. They followed Google Maps down the dirt road to a highway that they thought to be the light source. Halfway to the light, it was already clear it was really coming from cars, and not a mother with a lantern. It's easy to be a ghostbuster outside with your friends, but what if you had a ghost in your own home? This is what happened to a family who moved into an old house in 1921. The house was huge, with gas lights, no electricity, and many passageways. Just a classic movie haunted house. One morning, the lady who went down in records as Mrs. H heard footsteps over her head when she was home alone. She rushed upstairs and found an empty room. She checked every room and also looked one floor up. It was all empty. Then, she started hearing strange noises when she was in bed at night. It sounded like someone was moving furniture and china and sighed in the silence. Whatever was haunting the family was getting braver and braver. It followed them along the halls. It felt like it was about to approach them and come into contact. One of the children of Mrs. H once ran into her room and asked why she was calling him. She said it must have been the wind, but the child was positive it was someone's voice. The plants didn't live long in that house. Finally, the scariest thing happened. Mrs. H woke up one night and clearly saw a man and a woman in her room. She had to stop it all somehow, so she asked her brother-in-law for help. He did his research and suggested it could be a carbon monoxide leak. This colorless, odorless, and tasteless gas had caused similar visions in other people. When they checked the gas, they found the gas was coming out of the furnace and into the room instead of going out through the chimney. It gave the family headaches, hallucinations, dizziness, and other unpleasant symptoms. Some ghosts leave fingerprints behind, or so says the San Antonio legend. According to it, in 1938, a school bus was driving through a rough snowstorm and got stuck on the train tracks. When the train crew saw the bus, they did their best to stop, but it was impossible to avoid the collision. No one in the bus had survived in that accident, and ever since, the ghosts of those people are protecting others from the same fate. Hundreds of people have visited the spot ever since to play with destiny. They leave the car in neutral on so-called ghost tracks and wait for the ghosts to come and help them out. Some people put baby powder on their cars to have fingerprints as evidence. And they do see the fingerprints once they get out of the car. Turns out there's a logical explanation for this one as well. There's an incline on the tracks, so when the car moves a bit, you can see your own fingerprints in baby powder. And the original story that inspired the legend didn't even happen in San Antonio, but in Salt Lake City, Utah. Something unexplainable was happening on the campus of Coventry University in England. Whoever visited the 14th century cellar ran out of it in fear. They said they'd seen a ghost of a woman. One lecturer at the school, who was also a part-time ghostbuster, decided to debunk the mystery. He was once working at his lab when he felt the presence of someone else. He was brave enough to do research in the cellar and found out the reason for all this madness was what he called the fear frequency. The levels of sound frequency in the cellar were so high that they made people see optical illusions, feel anxiety, and get chills down the spine. A similar effect makes you hear humming of a glass when you're running a damp finger on it. A small village of Kalachi in Kazakhstan has become home to a unique, mysterious sickness nicknamed the Sleep Hollow. Back in 2013, the first villagers got affected by it. They were doing their regular routine, biking, going to work, or chatting with friends, when suddenly they'd fall asleep. It all looked similar: slurred speech, lightheadedness, and then boom! Some of them only woke up after 6 days of loud snoring. And when they did, they didn't remember anything that happened to them and experienced weakness and headaches. The Sleeping Beauty-style sickness affected people of all ages, including kids, and even a cat named Marquise. Its owner said the cat started attacking walls, furniture, and the family dog. Then it dozed off and was snoring like a human for hours. More than 150 people got the sleep hollow in 3 years. Doctors and sleep disorder experts struggled to find a solution. A lot of people blamed possible radiation from nearby uranium mines. Kazakhstan's doctors checked over 7,000 homes, but found the radiation levels weren't high enough to cause it. They also checked water supply in the area for heavy metals and bacteria, and it was all right as well. Then, the former head of the uranium mine suggested the gas was seeping through the ground. Scientists tested this theory, and it turned out to be the answer. The dangerous gas was in the air, and it took down the amount of oxygen, making people fall asleep. Families started moving out one by one from that sleepy hollow as soon as the mystery had been solved.
China plans on building a train that will connect mainland China to the United States. The track will start in the northeast region and then make its way through Siberia in eastern Russia. It will then go under the sea through the Bering Strait into Alaska in the US through a 125-mile underwater tunnel. It will then flow across Canada's Yukon Mountains and British Columbia and finally to the United States. And once there, it can connect to every major train station in America. The total distance, around 8,000 miles. This China, Russia, Canada, and US network was conceived in 2014 by a group of Chinese engineers who had a vision of a major transcontinental train track. They claim that if the project is built, then you will need just 2 days for a trip from China to America without having to go to the airport. A train ride is much smoother than a plane and offers people better opportunities to experience traveling near the ground rather than up in the air. And the trip itself can boost tourism across 4 countries. Even though a plane ride from China to the US takes just 14 hours, depending on where you're coming from, anyone will get to experience the joys of looking out of the window and seeing yourself whisk through the land. This new rail system will be 1,800 miles longer than the Trans-Siberian Railroad, which is the longest railroad in the world, and the tunnel itself will be 4 times longer than the English Channel. If the project gets the green light, then it would cost a total of $200 billion. Building on the main surface won't be so much of a hassle and won't be as challenging as one would expect. But the tunnel in the Bering Strait will require many skilled and experienced engineers to construct it. And they have already figured out how they're going to do it. It will be divided into 3 levels with 2-way traffic. The upper level will accommodate the high-speed trains, while the bottom level will be for the slow-moving cargo and passengers, while the middle level will be reserved for emergencies. The cargo train can move up to 100 million tons of cargo, which makes up 8% of the world's freight cargo between Europe, Russia, China, Japan, South Korea, Canada, and the United States. Passengers wanting to leave from Alaska to Russia and vice versa will only have to take a 20-minute high-speed train ride to their destination. The tunnel alone in the Bering Strait will cost around $35 billion. From start to finish, it could take anywhere between 12 to 15 years to complete. The project will involve many international firms and construction companies to help out with completing it. This could possibly be the most expensive project in history if funded properly. And it has to be strong enough to handle the icy waters in the Bering Strait and the strong waves around it. The China, Russia, Canada, America railway line would be the most expensive and ambitious mega project in history and would take years to complete. But according to some resources, China is confident that they have the technology necessary to do something of this scale. It will change the transportation industry forever and increase tourism across all continents. If this project is going to be built, then it would be technically possible to travel from a train station in Portugal all the way to the United States. Europe has an impressive train network that's all connected to each other. From Eastern Europe to Central Asia, you could take a train from certain countries until you end up in China. For the past 20 years, China's speedy rail network has grown incredibly. It has the world's largest high-speed rail network that covers more than 23,000 miles. Based in Shanghai, it's also the fastest commercially operating train, which reaches speeds up to 270 miles per hour. So once in China, you can get on any train and speed off to wherever you want to. It will be the ultimate traveling experience to only travel by train from continent to continent. There won't be any need to travel by an airplane. So if you have fear of flying, let's say, then this will be the perfect way for you to go by. But building train tunnels underwater isn't easy. The best engineers have to figure out all the risks beforehand. The Channel Tunnel, for example, is an underwater train that takes you from London to Paris in just 2.5 hours at cruising speed. The train is highly equipped with the most advanced technology in the market to ensure comfortable travel. If you have any work to do, then you can just pop open your laptop and connect to the Wi-Fi. Want to take a break? Just head to the cafe for a quick drink and enjoy the lounge feel and the great beverages. And if you feel like watching a movie or catching up on your favorite TV series, then the train offers that too. You won't feel the time pass since you can just relax in luxurious leather seats in business premier class. Train travels at around 186 miles per hour and is considered to be the world's longest underwater tunnel, considering that most of it is submerged. The tunnel itself is 31 miles long and costs $6.3 billion. It began construction in 1988 and was completed 6 years later in 1994. It was considered to be one of the 7 wonders of the modern world, in line with the Empire State Building in New York, or the Panama Canal, or the San Francisco's Golden Gate Bridge. And just like the China to US Dream project, this tunnel also has 3 tracks, 2 used for trains and a smaller one for emergencies. Each shuttle is 2.5 thousand feet long and needed 13,000 employees to construct it. Even though many people got to visit the City of Love in Paris and the multicultural hub of Europe in London, the channel is also used for import and export. According to some reports, 26% of traded goods travel between the UK and the rest of Europe each year using the tunnel. China approved the first underwater speed train from the port of Ningbo near Shanghai to Zhoushan, which is a group of islands on the east coast of China. The brand new railway will stretch for around 50 miles, with a decent part of it built underwater. What makes it cooler is that the train will rely on a magnetic track where the train cabins will float in the air on the tracks and speed away. If this project becomes a reality, then it will most likely feel like riding in a royal carriage. You can book cabins and rooms with multiple bedrooms and accommodations. You'd be treated like a guest of honor at any ceremony. Constant entertainment and food are yours all day long. Ticket prices may vary, but still be expensive, so not everyone could afford it. There's high-speed Wi-Fi, of course, in all areas, with some of the best seats in the world. It will be possible to live in Europe and work in Asia without flying. Even living in Russia and working in Alaska can be a reality. And if you were in the US, you can also remain on the ground and still get to London via the network. And once you reach Europe, you'd have to take the train to Paris and then the channel to London. But there hasn't been any news on the project so far. It hit an economic wall and is still in the conceptualizing stages. Many critics didn't hold back on how this project could not revolutionize the transportation industry, but might instead sink it into more depth. They claim that cargo ships and flights are just as good and a lot cheaper, so there's no need to put such large amounts of money for something that maybe only a handful of people can use. Moving cargo through trains won't necessarily be as fast as planes or ships. If this train network replaces shipping and flights, then many people who work in aviation would have to change jobs and move on to trains. Of course, something like this wouldn't happen overnight and would probably take decades. This project might even open doors for countries in Asia and Africa to build mega network speed trains all connected to each other. You might one day travel by train from South Africa all the way to the United States, passing through Africa, the Middle East, Central Asia, China, Russia, and eventually the US. And if the train network expands even more, it can reach all over South America, which would make your trip even longer. It could reach every continent in the world except Antarctica. Imagine a worldwide railway network of high-speed trains connected to every station on Earth.
Do you know the feeling when you've been trying to solve one mystery for your entire life? Nope? Well, Detective Anderson does. during almost 30 years of working for the police, he solved many riddles, caught hundreds of robbers, and helped save thousands of lives. There's a huge number of successfully solved cases on his record. At the age of 25, he caught a thief who changed his own face with plastic surgery once a year. When Anderson was 30, prisoners started breaking from jails all over the world. The detective successfully solved this case. At the age of 38, he discovered the secret base of a forbidden order in a volcano's mouth. By his 50s, he managed to explain all the most inexplicable things in the world. But there was something he couldn't solve. These were two mysteries from the 50s, cases of missing planes. All these years, Anderson has been scrolling through the details of this puzzle. Unfortunately, he was too young when this story began. All he had were guesses and notes. But today, a sudden thought struck him. For the first time in many years, he felt that he could finally solve this mystery. But to do this, he had to immerse himself in this story again. So he opened the closet and pulled out 2 old magazines with detailed articles about these incidents. The first one happened in the summer of 1955. July 1st, Pan Am Flight 914 was about to depart from New York Airport with 61 people on board. The plane model was a Douglas DC-4. It differed from modern aircraft, having giant propellers instead of turbines. So, all passengers fastened their seatbelts. The plane started taxiing down the runway, sped up, and took off. It went high into the sky and out of sight. Its destination was Florida. The flight time would be 3 hours. Dispatching services were watching the plane on their radar when suddenly, Pan Am 914 disappeared. The operator tried to contact the pilot but received no response. New York reported this to Florida. They said they couldn't see the plane either. Usually, pilots notify via radio if a plane crashes or gets into a storm. But this time, just nothing. After several unsuccessful attempts to establish the connection, they deployed large-scale search operations. Communication with the plane was interrupted when it was flying over the Atlantic Ocean. Therefore, the air company had to admit the aircraft crashed into the water. But this version had no proof. When planes fall that way, rescuers find floating debris. Some parts of the cabin or luggage always get to the surface. This time, rescuers found nothing. The plane didn't transmit any distress signals and didn't leave any traces of the crash. It seemed like it just disappeared into thin air. People forgot about this disaster for 37 years. And then, something bizarre happened. 1992, Venezuela, Caracas Airport. The control tower received a signal about an unknown aircraft approaching them. It was weird because it wasn't supposed to be there. There were no flights scheduled for that time. The plane was landing. The dispatcher and the rest of the airport staff understood that something was wrong here. The plane looked old, with huge propellers instead of turbines. After landing, the pilot contacted the airport.
Where are we?
The dispatcher asked him to identify himself. A few seconds later, he received an answer.
We are Pan Am Flight 914 departed from New York to Florida with a crew of 4 people and 57 passengers on board.
The dispatcher didn't know what to do next. He and the airport staff understood what kind of plane they were looking at. What was this plane doing 37 years later and almost 1,240 miles away from its destination? After a few seconds, the startled dispatcher turned on the microphone and said,
It is September 9th, 1992. You know that?
A long pause followed. Then, the pilot responded in a panic.
Oh no. Jimmy, where are we? No! Stay away! Let's go now!
The airport staff saw the pilot waving his hands in horror through the glass. Then, he started the engines and took the plane to the runway. Pan Am 914 increased its speed and took off. The dispatcher tried to stop him, but the pilot didn't respond. The plane disappeared into the sky, and no one else had heard of it since that day. Detective Anderson finished reading the article. He frowned and looked out the window. Raindrops were hitting the glass. The storm outside perfectly depicted what was happening in his mind at that moment. He seemed to know what had happened to that plane. All the clues were there, lying right in front of his eyes. But to know for sure, Anderson had to move on to the next case. It was another article, dated 1989. It happened in 1954. Santiago Airlines Flight 513 took off from West Germany Airport. The plane was due to land in Brazil in 18 hours. There were 88 passengers and 4 crew members on board. The plane hid behind the clouds and disappeared from all radar. Air traffic controllers were trying to contact the pilots, but didn't receive a response. 18 hours later, they called the airport in Brazil. Those dispatchers couldn't confirm this plane's landing and couldn't contact the pilots either. The search operation lasted for several months, but they found nothing. Just like in the Pan Am 914 case, the plane disappeared from radar while flying over the Atlantic Ocean. 2 years later, the search operation ended, and Santiago Airlines ceased its activities. October 12, 1989. Airport controllers in Brazil noticed a passenger plane that suddenly appeared on their radar. It didn't answer the airport staff's questions and just circled over the airbase. After a few minutes, the plane landed and nothing. No one opened the ramp. Passengers didn't get out. Pilots didn't respond. The aircraft was in perfect condition. One of the dispatchers realized that this was the missing Santiago Airlines Flight 513 that had been considered lost for 35 years. Airport staff approached the plane and opened the doors. What they saw there terrified them. The police, customs staff, doctors, detectives, and other airport staff members gathered around the plane. No one knew what to do next. There was no living person on board who could tell the truth. The plane disappeared in 1954 and appeared 35 years later in perfect condition without any damage. So far, no one has figured out what happened. Detective Anderson noticed the stories were very similar. Pan Am 914 disappeared in 1955. Santiago Airlines 513 vanished in 1954. The difference was almost a year. Anderson scratched his head and noticed another little detail. Both planes went missing from the radar the moment they were flying over the Atlantic Ocean. There are many myths about phantom ships and mysterious phenomena connected with the Bermuda Triangle. Detective Anderson knew these tales, but these 2 missing planes puzzled him. He looked at 2 articles and understood everything. Exactly! The solution was there, right in front of his eyes. Both stories were written in the same newspaper. There was no real dispatcher who communicated with the planes. Nothing was known about the passengers. No newspapers except this one published news about these missing aircraft. It seemed they just took the same story and changed the dates, locations, and names of flights. Yes, the case was solved. It was all fake. The rain stopped. Detective Anderson looked out the window and heard the sound of a passing train. He remembered another weird and fake story. A story about a phantom train. It took place in Italy in 1911. 100 passengers boarded the train of the Zanetti Railway Company. It went through the picturesque mountainous area, got into a mountain tunnel, and disappeared. No one else had seen the train since then. All the passengers were lost, but not for long. They appeared in the past. There were records dated 1845. One unknown doctor from Mexico City wrote about 100 Italians who appeared in the city from nowhere. They were all dressed strangely and talked about one mysterious train. This was a completely made-up story. There was no proof or records about this train and the people who got into the past. A loud sound interrupted his thoughts. Detective Anderson picked up the phone. He was silently listening to the person on the other end of the line. A minute later, he answered, "Yes." The detective put the phone down. It was a new mystery for him. In the Sahara Desert, the locals noticed a huge ship lost in the South Pacific 27 years ago. There was no crew on board, no cargo, and no flags. No one knew how it appeared among the sand, but wet mud formed around it because of moisture. It seemed like the ship had just teleported there from the water. Perfect! No fakes this time. Detective Anderson put on his hat and left the office. But this story is for another video. A flea is probably way faster than you think. It can accelerate more quickly than the space shuttle. A jumping flea can reach dizzying heights of up to 3 inches in only a millisecond, which is insanely fast. Acceleration is the term that stands for a change in speed of a certain object over a period of time. You measure it in G's. Gravity at Earth's surface creates an acceleration of 1 G, which is 32.2 feet per second squared. The space shuttle accelerated at about 5 G, but when fleas jump, they experience an acceleration of 100 G. The difference is so huge because the flea's body contains a certain type of stretchy rubber-like protein. It allows the insect to store and release energy when it's most needed. Remember those yellow plastic bumps you can see along the edge of a train station platform? We officially call them TGSIs, which stands for Tactile Ground Surface Indicators. They may not look that big, but it takes a crew of workers to install them. First, they need to grind the old yellow line off the platform. Then they temporarily bolt a steel straight edge into place. This helps the workers know where they should drill holes. They need to have a special drilling rig that will create the holes with the proper spacing. Once they complete all the holes, a curious-looking grid appears on the ground. Then the workers start hammering in plastic dimples, one by one. These bumps are part of the platform edge warning surface. Their purpose is to give a warning to vision-impaired people and let them know that they've gotten too close to the edge of a train platform. Lightning has an incredibly high temperature of about 50,000 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 5 times hotter than the surface of the sun. Generally, it strikes more than 8 million times a day all over the world, which is approximately 93 lightning strikes per second. Despite popular misconception, it is possible for lightning to strike the same place twice. It also tends to aim for objects that are isolated, tall, and pointy. For instance, the Empire State Building gets hit up to 100 times a year. Are you one of those people who associate citrus smells with being clean? That's because, in the past, people often used lemons for household cleaning. Its juice contains citric acid that dissolves limescale and helps bring the shine back to such things as copper pans. That's why people extracted lemon oil from the peel and used it in wood polish. Even after commercial detergents and cream cleaners appeared on the market, people still preferred to add lemon oil for its pleasant scent. Boeing uses potatoes when they're working on improving their in-flight Wi-Fi. You can't make people sit for days at a time while new Wi-Fi systems are being tested. But they still need something that could mimic the conditions of passengers on a flight. So, why not take potatoes? It's a perfect choice because, due to their water content and chemistry, these vegetables absorb and reflect radio wave signals the same way our bodies do. You may see lily pads as pretty delicate things that float peacefully on the surface of the water, like leaves. It's hard to believe that such a leaf can support a weight of 70 pounds. It's as much as a large dog, like the Bergamasco sheepdog or Bernese mountain dog, weighs. But if you want a lily pad to hold this weight, you need to distribute it evenly across the surface of the leaf. For example, by placing a sheet of plywood on top of the lily pad. Even a single T-Rex seems rather scary, right? Now, picture 2.5 billion of these fierce dino kings wandering around different locations all over Earth. Scientists believe that's how many of them probably roamed our planet in total. But they didn't all exist at the same time. There have been more than 127,000 generations of these dinosaurs over a couple of million years. Still scary, though. The moon is very far away from us. Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter are even farther. The solar system is huge. Our home Milky Way galaxy is even bigger. And don't forget that there are many other galaxies out there that we'll probably never find, even though scientists keep discovering new space objects all the time. But only 5% of the universe is visible. This visible part includes planets, moons, stars, galaxies, and other space bodies. We can't see the rest of it and have no idea what it might look like. A huge part of the universe, more than 70%, consists of dark energy. Dark matter makes up 25%, but that's something people can't detect. Dark matter doesn't interact with ordinary matter. It's also invisible and doesn't emit light or any form of electromagnetic radiation. But scientists believe it exists because of some unusual gravitational effects galaxies and galaxy clusters experience. For example, according to the laws of physics, Stars located at the edge of a spinning spiral galaxy are supposed to orbit way more slowly than those that are close to the galactic center. The center of a galaxy is a spot where the largest amount of visible matter is concentrated. But stars travel at approximately the same speed, regardless of their location in the galactic disk. And this only makes sense if you assume that the stars at the edge of a galaxy are under the gravitational effects of some unseen mass. This mass might be hiding in a halo surrounding the galaxy. Did you know people can produce venom? Well, obviously not at the moment, but technically, that's something humans could do. All reptiles and mammals are capable of doing that. We mostly see this ability in such creatures as snakes, spiders, or slow lorises, which are the only venomous species of primates we know about. Biologists have found a shared genetic past between venom and saliva, which means that venomous reptiles and mammals have a distant common ancestor. Saliva glands are like empty bowls, while venom glands are those same bowls filled with venom. We're not missing some special mechanisms or genes. We don't have special proteins that could help us fill those bowls. It means that anyone and anything that has salivary glands could potentially become venomous, from mice all the way up to people. There's a reason we all enjoy the smell of rain. This smell even has a special name, Petrichor. Water doesn't have any particular smell, but when it rains, the air gets filled with a pleasant aroma. This happens because of special molecules geosmin, soil-dwelling bacteria create. So you look outside and notice that it's raining. At this moment, small air pockets are forming. They contain tiny amounts of these molecules. The rain first traps and then releases such air pockets. By doing this, it sends these molecules into the air. Then they travel all over the place and produce that trademark rain smell. By the way, rain isn't always droplets of water. It can actually rain fish, frogs, or some other odd things you wouldn't expect to be falling from the sky. Such cases are rare, but they do happen, especially during powerful thunderstorms. Tornado winds can be so powerful that they will propel objects and animals high into the air. And eventually, they all have to go down. One small town in Australia reported hundreds of fish falling from the sky back in 2010. There are planets out there that don't have regular rains either. On Venus, as well as on some other planets and moons, the rain is made of methane and sulfuric acid. There's even a planet 5,000 light-years away from us where raindrops are made of iron. Deep within Uranus, Saturn, and Neptune, it might be raining diamonds. It's hard to prove it because the outer planets of our solar system are really difficult to study. But scientists assume that extreme pressure on these planets might crystallize carbon atoms, turning them into diamonds. They go so far as to believe that 2.2 million pounds of diamonds might form on Saturn every year. There's a small town in Norway that is located north of the Arctic Circle. There, the sun doesn't set at all in the period between May 18th and July 26th. That's why the inhabitants of the place want to eliminate the entire concept of time. During that period, it's always light outside, and people act accordingly. If you came there and were walking in the middle of the night, let's say at 2 a.m., you could see people playing soccer, mowing lawns, painting their houses, or going for a swim. People can use just a small percentage of the total amount of water on our planet. It's true that about 71% of Earth's surface is covered with water, but we can only use 0.3% of that water. The rest is in ice caps, glaciers, oceans, soil, or floating in the planet's atmosphere, which means it's not accessible to us.
Hello, Brightsiders! Do you want to ride the world's fastest train ever? So you're at the station waiting for the train, and suddenly a strong gust of wind blows up and people's hats fly up in the air. This gust was caused by the fastest train in the world, which just passed your station at 375 miles per hour, without making a sound. What is this miracle? It is the SC Maglev train developed by Japan Railways Company, and it has set a new world record for speed and will connect Japan's largest cities, Tokyo, Nagoya, and Osaka. The entire route will take 67 minutes. So this train could make the trip from New York to Washington, D.C. in just 1 hour. That's faster than getting there by a plane. And at the same time, the train wouldn't create noise or pollute the atmosphere. After all, it doesn't even have an engine. And it doesn't make the wheels clatter against the rails because the train levitates in the air and doesn't touch the ground. And there aren't even any rails. Do you want to know how it works? Let me tell you. Let's take a look under the skin of the train. All the train uses to move is magnets, or rather, superconducting magnets. These ovals are our supermagnets. So what's so special about them? If you run an electric current through them, they create a strong magnetic field around themselves. You can see it on these lines. And the more robust the current, the bigger and more powerful the magnetic field is. But the electric current gradually heats the magnet and its efficiency goes down. The magnetic field gets weaker too. Because of the high temperature, the magnet creates more resistance to the current. A regular phone charger works pretty much the same way. The wire can get hot when you charge your phone because it creates a slight resistance to the electric current, like in our electromagnets on the train. The obvious solution is to cool the magnet down to turn it into a superconductor. We can do this if we reach a temperature of minus 440 degrees Fahrenheit. It's almost like the temperature of outer space. At that temperature, the magnet material stops resisting electric current altogether. That's why it's called a superconductor. The main advantage of this is that we don't need to supply electric current to the magnet all the time. We only need to charge the magnet once. Then the current will circle inside it indefinitely and the magnetic field will be solid. So how do we reach this super low temperature? To cool the electromagnet, we need a liquid helium tank. This frigid substance circulates in the case around the magnet and cools it. As it does, the helium evaporates and goes to a kind of a refrigerator. There, it's cooled again and compressed to its original state. And the liquid helium is sent back into the tank at the end of the cycle. But even that's not enough to keep the magnet in a superconductor state. So the engineers added another heat shield. It's a kind of a box with liquid nitrogen circulating in it. It goes through the same cycle as the liquid helium. Such blocks of 4 superconducting magnets and cooling units are installed along the entire length of the train on either side. And these magnets are only half of the force that makes the train move. The other half is hidden in the guideways. So what's inside there? Similar O-shaped electromagnets are mounted on the sides of the guideway. The polarity alternates between north-south and north-south, north-south, and it just keeps going like that. Just like the polarity of the magnets inside the train. Now, let's put our trains on a guideway. You can see that the magnets inside the train and the guideway are on the same level. So, how do we make a train move without it having an engine? We know that the opposite poles of magnets, north and south, will attract, and the matching charges will push back like north and north. These arrows show the forces of attraction and repulsion of the magnets, and all the forces here are directed diagonally. The resulting force here is directed forward, and the train is starting to move forward a little bit. Now, the train has to reverse the polarity of its magnets. This is done by changing the direction of the electric current inside the magnets. Again, there are those forces of attraction and repulsion between the train and the guideway, and the train keeps going. The driver can adjust the train's speed by changing the polarity of the magnets. The more often north changes to south, the faster the train will go. But why doesn't the train fall off to the ground? It is the most exciting thing about the train: levitation. Many people think that the train doesn't touch the ground because the bottom of the train is a giant magnet. At the same time, the guideway is a huge magnet of the same polarity. The magnets repel and the train levitates. That's not true. The magnets on the sides of the guideway do all the work. They're the same O-shaped magnets, only twisted so that they look like a number 8. Imagine a pair of magnets within either side of the train is one giant magnet. The north is on the left and the south is on the right. It hangs precisely in the middle of the 8-shaped magnet when the train rides. But gravity forces the train down. Then the train's magnetic field charges this 8-shaped coil. Now an electric current is moving in it too. As a result, the top loop of the magnet is charged south and the bottom loop north. The magnets interact and the resulting force is directed upward and the train rises. The same thing happens when the train goes down. The 8-shaped magnets are charged so that the top loop is north and the bottom south. The resulting force is downward and the train goes down. It happens on its own thanks to the laws of physics, without the driver even needing to do anything. And the train keeps going, floating above the guideway at the height of about 4 inches. That's like the height of a toothpaste tube. So the train can only levitate when it moves? Exactly. That doesn't mean that it just falls to the ground when it arrives at the station. Maglev has regular wheels for this as well. The train stands on the wheels at the station and then picks up the speed on them. The wheels retract like airplane landing gear when it reaches about 95 miles per hour. And the driver only lowers them when they need to stop at the station again. But if it doesn't have wheels, it can't turn, right? Well, yes, but it turns and maneuvers using the guideway. It is done by these identical 8-shaped coils we've seen before. They're connected to each other under the guideway's surface. When the train shifts to the right, its magnets charge the coils. But because the train's magnets are more toward the right coil, it's charged more. And the magnetic field is much stronger there. It creates a force that pushes the train back to the center of the guideway. The same thing happens if the train moves to the left. The coil charges and the magnetic field pushes the train to the center. Ding ding! The bell sounds and the maglev departs from the station in Tokyo. It accelerates to the speed where the magnetic field will allow it to levitate, and the driver removes the wheels and increases the speed. The train reverses the polarity of the magnets in a fraction of a second and the train accelerates. In an hour, the train arrives at its destination. The driver slows the machine down and the magnetic field becomes weaker. It's time to let the wheels out. The train lands and begins to slow down. Such an advanced technology must have a lot of problems, right? Well, yes. The first is size. The maglev is much smaller and can carry fewer passengers. Also, the rails can change direction for a train in a couple of seconds, but to change a guideway direction for a maglev would require more expensive and much slower technology. So, on the same stretch of guideway, high-speed trains on rails can run every 3 minutes compared to 10 for a maglev train. Another problem is aerodynamics. The faster the train goes, the harder it is for it to get through the air. At 190 miles per hour, the maglev and the other superfast trains use about the same amount of energy. But at the speeds above 310 miles per hour, the maglev will consume 4 times as much electricity. And given the small number of passengers on the train, tickets to it will be so much more expensive than conventional trains. In addition, the maglev can't run on traditional rails, and the engineers will need to build an utterly new guideway route. And they'll need to drill a lot of tunnels, which will make the project even more expensive. So why would Japan need such an expensive and impractical solution? For several reasons. The first is seismic activity. Japan is the site of many earthquakes, and traditional rails often get damaged. An earthquake can destroy the entire infrastructure in just a couple of minutes. Maglev's guideways will be laid further off the coast in the so-called green zone, where earthquakes won't threaten the train or the guideways. And the main reason, this high-speed train will connect 3 heavily populated cities. The route from one to another will take 1 hour at most. It will give a massive chance for overall economic growth and could bring in a lot of money in the future. Also, Japan is considering selling this train to other countries. So, would you want this train in your state? And if so, where would your first trip be to? Leave the answers in the comments.
Wow, your phone falls right on the train tracks as you were trying to slip it into your pocket. You're jammed up at the entrance of the train. You look down below you and see that it's within arm's reach. But as soon as everyone's in, the door will shut and the train will be on the move. You only have a fraction of a second to decide if you want to keep your phone or pay hundreds of dollars for a new one. There are still more people flowing in, so you get out of the train to fetch your phone. From where you were standing, it looked a lot closer than now. You can't reach down with your arm, so you have no choice but to hop down the tracks. You see your phone beneath the rails. You notice all the years of accumulated trash chilling by your phone. As you reach down, a rat scurries past you and brushes itself on your finger before hiding in a dark corner. You freak out, but hear the sound of the door closing. Some people notice you. You grab your phone and climb up to the pavement, but you can't reach up. The train is fired up and begins moving. Luckily, some people pull you up in time before the train speeds away through the tunnels. Woohoo! Now, in reality, doing something like this should be the last thing on your mind. A better solution would be to inform someone in charge, or if possible, the train conductor. Dropping down on some train tracks should be an immediate red flag. The safest thing to do would be to let it go and buy a new phone. You arrive at your destination after catching a new train and are walking down the sidewalk. While you're texting, someone bumps into you, and your phone falls in a deep puddle of water right on the street. Every second counts when it comes to water on electronics, so without hesitating, you dip your hand in the murky street water and pull out your phone. When inspecting it, you realize that it's still on, but don't be celebrating just yet. It doesn't mean it'll last. You need to turn off your phone immediately after it drops in the water. You move to an uncrowded spot and try to disassemble it to dry each part on its own. Depending on your phone, you can either remove the back cover and battery, or if that's not possible, take out the cover and screen protector if you have them. You grab a towel and immediately start drying it. You brush along anything that water could wash its way in, like the charging port, the headphone jack, SIM and SD card tray. Never ever use a hairdryer to heat it till it dries up manually. Your phone won't love this, and it will continue to break your gadget faster. You could also try out the old trick of placing your phone in uncooked rice. First, you have to go through the same process of drying it up, and only then dunk it in rice, covering it from all sides. Even though the rice absorbs the water, it won't be able to get all the moisture in the tiny nooks and crannies of your phone. Plus, you might be walking out with a rice-covered phone. That's why silica gel is a better option if you happen to have some from the pockets of new clothes or shoes. It does a better job at absorbing moisture and keeping things dry. After drying it up, you turn on your phone again and it works as if nothing happened. You continue walking, but this time your phone is safe in your pocket. You arrive home and check your phone for notifications, but notice that your emails are piling up from unusual accounts that look fishy. As you try to open them, your phone crashes and freezes multiple times before many pop-up ads flash on the screen. You try to get rid of them, but there are just too many, and some social media apps open up randomly without you clicking on them. You check your call and message logs and notice some weird history that you don't remember. Your battery jumps from 60% to 30% in a matter of minutes just when you take it out of the charger. One of the first things you gotta do is download some software to get rid of the malware. Because of it, anyone can quickly get into your phone and look through your banking details and social media accounts. Never download any apps that don't seem trustworthy. Checking out reviews and ratings can usually indicate if the app is safe. Having a complex password is always a good idea for phones and laptops. Adding capital letters and symbol characters always decreases the risk of having malware. Basic numbers like 1234 or your dog's birthday are guessable and leave your phone vulnerable. It also helps to have different passwords for different accounts. Clearing your internet history and cache is a simple way to protect your phone, since it doesn't leave any traces for anyone to get in through browsers and searches. You freak out and take your phone to get it repaired. Then, once it is, you feel like you just bought a new device fresh from the box. But as you head home and climb up the stairs to your apartment, your phone slips out of your pocket and falls 4 flights of stairs, cracking the screen and chipping little tiny pieces. You are now officially a Butterfingers. You quickly head down and see something resembling what used to be your phone. The phone may seem unresponsive at first, but you don't know if its hardware or software was damaged. If the touchscreen doesn't work, you can plug in a mouse where the charging port is and click on some apps to see if it works. At least all your data didn't go to waste. If the screen is completely broken and you can see the insides of your phone, try plugging it into a laptop and see if it reads the phone. That's if your charging ports are still working. You find out that the software wasn't damaged, so you take it back to the repair shop where the store owner, who you now know on a first-name basis, goes to work again. And after a couple of days, you finally get it back good as new. You get a cab and head to work. You're running late and quickly get to the office. But as you check your pockets, you realize you left your phone in the cab. Are we surprised? You try calling it with your colleague's phone, but no one answers it. Any iOS and Android device has its own security system for locking your phone remotely. As soon as you access it through another device linked to all of your accounts, you can delete everything. Make sure to have the app on before losing it. After that, call your cellular provider and report and have them deactivate your line. You don't want anyone else using all your credit, which will be eaten up from your bank account. Call your bank and ask if any purchases have been made under your name. It's also best to cancel and freeze your accounts at this point. A phone's serial number is key to knowing where your phone is in case it's gone missing. If you ever find it halfway across the world on some remote island, identifying the serial number would be the first step to getting it back. As soon as you download the security apps, leave them on. They consume more battery in the background, but safety should always be a priority if you're moving around a lot. Back up your info as often as you can, or turn on automatic backups. You don't want to see all the data you've been collecting over the years vanish. Suddenly, you get a call from you. You pick up and find out that the cab driver finished work and went to clean his car and discovered your phone on the floor of his vehicle. You're relieved, and he says he'll bring it right over to you. As soon as you get your phone back, you put it in a safe place where nobody would ever guess where it was, even you. Have you ever noticed the colorful stripes painted on train cars? Turns out, railway companies don't waste paint just for aesthetic reasons. Every stripe design, or livery, the proper term for it, has a special meaning and serves a very important purpose. Stripes can indicate the speed of the train, the destination, and the type of carriage or service, but they're also part of the variety of symbols that help passengers understand train-related information and navigate through the station and the train. Sometimes you can find special stripes painted in different colors above the last window of some coaches. They warn passengers that this particular coach is somehow different from the others. Of course, these symbols will vary depending on the country. For example, Indian railway operators apply white stripes on blue railway coaches to indicate the unreserved second-class cars of a particular train. These stripes help passengers easily identify the available general coach when the train arrives on the platform. Meanwhile, red stripes on gray coaches indicate the first-class compartments. And these broad yellow stripes, painted on a blue or red background, indicate that the cars are reserved for sick or physically disabled passengers. And if you ever see gray coaches with green stripes on Indian trains, it means that only women are allowed to use them. Also, in 2019, the North Frontier Railway Zone of the Indian Railways introduced these pink female sleeper coaches. They were trying to encourage women to make long-distance journeys. During these trips, train workers make sure that outsiders don't have access to this car to provide better security to the female passengers that travel alone or with minor children. And the bright color helps identify female cars even during rush hours. In Japan, they also use the pink color to put special stripes on metro and suburban train lines to identify women-only cars. Male passengers are not allowed to board these cars during rush hours for security reasons. The same women-only carriages have been created in the subways of Brazil, Dubai, Indonesia, Iran, and Egypt. But let's go back to the railroad. Turns out there's a better way to get rid of annoying fellow travelers. You can buy a private railway carriage, reconstruct its interior, and make your own cozy apartment on wheels. If you're wealthy enough, of course. The National Railroad Passenger Corporation, also known as Amtrak, has provided passenger railroad services in the U.S. and Canada since the 1970s. The company has introduced a special offer. If you have a private carriage, well, Amtrak is eager to hitch it onto the scheduled train services between specified locations. This way, you can adjust your own route and travel all over the United States like a boss. Although you won't have to buy a train ticket, you'll still get a bunch of other fees, including a yearly safety inspection, annual registration fees for your private carriage, a mileage rate based on where and when you're traveling, and any other charges for any extra services. Storage cost in Amtrak's yard, for example, comes in at around $2,000 per month. And you'll have to buy a carriage in the first place. If you're just a beginner in this business without a tight budget, hey, don't worry, they'll train you. Ha, that's a joke. Actually, you can start with an unrestored beater car without electric power. Its price will start at about $25,000. Meanwhile, a fully restored carriage can cost up to $500,000, and up to infinity if you decide to push the interior to the highest level. Why not? And what if you don't want to spend very much money, but would still like to experience a rail trip in your own car? Some private collectors rent out their railway carriages to other people for short-term trips, parties, or historical tours. So, if you want to experience this adventure, just do the research in your area. Some of these tours will allow you to visit masterpiece carriages with truly sophisticated restored interiors. Now, although owning a private carriage is a very expensive hobby, at least you can paint and decorate it however you like. Meanwhile, ordinary commercial rail cars have strict corporate color schemes and cannot afford to be authentic. Sometimes we see very similar trains owned by the same company, but the stripes that decorate the cars on the outside are still slightly different. Have you ever wondered why? Who decides that, and what does it mean? Well, it usually means that the trains have been painted at different times and in different places, following the evolution of the corporate brand book and the arrival of new models of locomotives and cars. For example, Amtrak, as I mentioned earlier, remember, has developed a variety of paint schemes on its rolling stock since the beginning of intercity passenger rail services. There are 7 basic schemes or phases in use. These phases use geometric arrangements of red, white, and blue, representing the colors of the U.S. flag. The themes look alike, but the most attentive passengers will definitely not have a hard time spotting those little variations. Here's the so-called Phase 1, first introduced in 1972. Amtrak painted its locomotives using the elegant platinum mist color, or in more simple terms, light gray. They put the iconic Arrow logo on the side and painted the roofs black. The nose is painted red on purpose. It makes the locomotive more visible to pedestrians and drivers. The company covered its passenger cars with silver paint and then red and blue stripes bracketed by thin white stripes at window level. The chevron logo was then put at one or both ends. 2 years later, the company began to operate the new GE E60 locomotives, and it launched the Phase 2 paint scheme. They replaced the famous red nose and chevron logo on the locomotives and painted stripes similar to those on the passenger cars. Most passenger cars were essentially unchanged from Phase 1 except for the removal of the chevron logo. After 2 years, Amtrak introduced Phase 3 and still uses it on some equipment. It removed the outer white pinstripes on both passenger cars and locomotives. The inner stripe was widened and the red, white, and blue stripes became equally wide. The company also painted turboliners and the LRC test train white and applied stripes at the bottom of the train. The white band was rather reflective and allowed a place for the car information. Continuing our train fashion show, next in 1993, the company introduced Phase 4. It was a striking change after the previous era of the traditional red, white, and blue style. Phase 4 has 2 thin red stripes and a thick dark blue stripe. In this period, Amtrak brought the new Superliner 2 cars into service. In 1997, Amtrak distributed this scheme among some locomotives on the Northeast Corridor services. That's a lot of adjustment so far. But let's move on to the next phase. When Amtrak began to operate Acela Express high-speed train sets in 2000, it launched Phase 5, and it's still widely used today. They painted locomotives light gray. At the top, they applied a blue stripe, which was darker than Phases 1 through 3, but lighter than Phase 4. And the bottom was decorated with a thin red reflective sill stripe. The company put its logo near the front or rear of the unit. Meanwhile, express boxcars received blue stripes on both top and bottom. And all non-passenger cars, like Autotrain auto racks, received an all-gray finish with one red stripe and logo. And now we're heading into Phase 6, also known as Phase 4B. Why? Don't ask. Amtrak introduced it in 2002, and it's currently in use on most passenger cars. They kept the same stripe style as Phase 4, including wide window stripes on single-level cars and narrow stripes on superliners. The red reflective sill stripe and mid-tone blue on Phase 5 are still in use. Single-level cars got white logos within a blue stripe, while superliners got blue logos below the stripes. 5 of the first 6 Siemens Charger ALC 42 logos retain this beautiful Phase 6 scheme, mostly blue body with red and black around the windshield and red and silver chevrons at the rear. In July 2021, Amtrak celebrated its 50th anniversary and introduced some new designs to mark this milestone. 6 new specially made anniversary locomotives include this unique midnight blue livery that celebrates the company's employees who keep passengers moving across the nation throughout the night. Amtrak also presented a sneak peek of what Phase 7 will look like and promised to bring a greater sense of modernity and cohesion throughout their train designs. Okay, but what about this fashionable train creature? You've probably recognized this color scheme. Railway companies call it tiger stripes because it reminds them of the stripes of a tiger. Okay, I get it. They use this paint pattern to improve the visibility of their locomotives. First of all, the entire locomotive gets painted bright yellow, and then they add diagonal black stripes to the front and back. This way, you can see this tiger moving from a very far distance. And, like, keep off the tracks.
You're standing on the red carpet, waiting for the train to come. The Maharajas Express is India's most expensive and luxurious train ride. It's heavy on the wallet, too. The prices can range from $2,900 to a whopping $23,000. This multi-award-winning train has a bunch of extravagant rooms to pick from. It also passes through more than 10 different cities in India. The train finally arrives and you board it. You're accompanied by many friendly staff members that help you with your luggage. They show you in and give you a quick tour of the amenities before leading you to your room. Like every other room, yours has a butler to fulfill any of your requests. The deluxe cabin has a luxury and cozy interior with international safety features. Among them, there are smoke detectors and security cams. The suspension system underneath the railroad car smooths all the bumps, letting you relax completely. You enter a 112 square foot cabin to take a look. The first thing you see is a king-sized bed with high-end bed sheets. It seems to be inviting you to come and take a nap. You have a closet for all your stuff and a large LCD television with a DVD player. But don't worry, there's Wi-Fi as well. There's also a personalized safe to keep your things and documents. Inside the cabin, there's a bathroom with a shower cubicle and hot and cold running water. It's equipped with a hairdryer and even has such toiletries as essential oils. There's probably no need to mention that the bathroom has bath slippers, a bathrobe, and several towels that can always be washed upon request. After going around the cabin, you decide to check the other rooms they offer. The train has 20 of these deluxe cabins, 12 of which have twin beds and 8 king-size beds. There are plenty of staff members for all the passengers, so that you won't feel underserved. You move on to the junior suite and notice that it's bigger than the deluxe suite. This one is 150 square feet and offers the same luxuries as the previous one. All these suites come with air conditioning and a direct interphone to contact any staff member. After you've taken a look around, the butler escorts you to the suite. He opens the door for you, and you immediately feel as if you've set foot in a royal palace. The suite is way bigger than the other 2 cabins. Its size is 220 square feet, and it even has a separate living room. There are 4 of such rooms on the train, and they all come with king-size beds and large panoramic windows to enjoy amazing views. You go inside for a room tour. The cabin has the same features as the others, but the living room has armchairs with side tables to do some reading or work on your laptop. The suite also has a mini fridge equipped with complimentary tea, coffee, water, and snacks. The bathroom has a bathtub to relax or even take a nap in. You're sold. You're ready to unpack and dip in that bathtub. But that's when the butler tells you there's an even bigger cabin. You stop gawking at the walls and ceiling and follow him to the presidential suite. There's just one such suite on the train. The butler opens the door for you, and wow, this 450 square foot mini palace is the most luxurious train cabin in all of India and one of the best in Asia. It has the same features as the other cabins, but you can't take your eyes off that beautifully decorated ceiling and spacious design that makes you feel like royalty. The presidential suite is named Navaratana. It means 9 precious gems. It has 2 bedrooms, a bathroom, and a living room. One bedroom has a king-sized bed, and the other has twin beds. The living room is furnished with a sofa where you can read a book or relax, and a table for writing. This suite comes with a personal guide and a luxury car that takes you around whenever the train makes a stop. You put your bags down and sign up for the presidential suite. It's the most expensive cabin on the train, $23,000. The train starts moving after everyone has boarded. You inform the butler that you don't want to be disturbed and ask him to remind you for breakfast at 8 a.m. For now, you lie down on your bed and look out the window at the magnificent views of India. It's 8 a.m., and the butler tells you it's time to go to the restaurant. You leave your cabin, and the staff members greet and welcome you. You walk over to one of the restaurants called Mayor Mahal, which means peacock. It's the national bird of India. You're seated by the window and given a menu. You can choose between international and Indian cuisine. The waiters are on standby, ready to offer you their services. By the way, in case an emergency happens, there's always a team of paramedics prepared to act quickly. The Maharajas Express offers 4 unique journeys to take: the Indian Panorama, the Indian Splendor Journey, the Heritage of India, and the Treasures of India. Altogether, the trips can take you to 12 different destinations. You pick the Indian Panorama, which is a 6-night and 7-day-long tour that begins in Delhi and ends in Mumbai. After breakfast, you head back to your presidential suite and switch on a movie while eating some yummy snacks. The train leaves Delhi and arrives in Jaipur several hours later. After a quick briefing and lunch, everyone heads down to the city to do some sightseeing. The guide takes you and a bunch of other people to visit the City Palace galleries, and later, to have dinner at the Rambagh Palace Hotel. The next day, you can either opt for another tour or have a spa day at the hotel. You arrive in Ranthambore and have a tour around the national park. You come across tigers and other wild animals. After that, you take other tours, including a trip to deserted city Mughal city of Fatehpur Sikri. You head back to the train after a long day and decide to visit the lounge. The Raja Club has comfortable seats with an amazing view of the world outside. You pick a seat, order a drink, and start chatting with other passengers. You even find a fun board game to unleash your competitive side. After a while, some people go back to their cabins. The next day, you wake up in Agra, the city of the Taj Mahal. It's considered to be one of the wonders of the world. Your eyes start gleaming at the sight of it. Everyone gathers around to take pictures with a colossal white marble construction in the background. After that, you can visit more historic sites or have another spa day at the hotel. You pick the second option. It's a one-of-a-kind experience. You're almost all the way through the trip, but not before you arrive at Orca and hop on a tuk-tuk to explore the city. Then it's day 6, and you're in Varanasi and go see the Sarnath ruins, followed by a visit to the Silk Weaving Center. It's quite hot, so you take a boat ride on the magical Ganges River. You're impressed by the amazing scenery, and in the evening, you experience an exclusive vegetarian dinner at the Bridge Ram Palace. You head back to the train together with everyone else. This is the last night you'll spend there before going back home the next day. You've made lots of friends and seen some of the most unique places in the world. You take part in a lavish party at the restaurant, where all the guests and staff enjoy themselves. You wake up the next day in your presidential suite, knowing you'll leave it by 3 p.m. The train is heading back to Delhi. You ask your butler to bring in some breakfast since you feel like treating yourself today. And after packing all your stuff, you head to the restaurant to have some lunch with everyone else. You arrive in Delhi with all your bags packed and ready to roll. The train stops and everyone exits. This magnificent trip has eventually come to its end. And even though it was a very expensive journey, deep inside, you know you'll be back to discover more of India.